what is a good explanation? In his book, The Beginning of Infinity, David Deutsch talks about the value of explanation as the key driver of progress and science. He relates it to Karl Popper. He talks about the Enlightenment. And in the podcast Topcast, this topic is even deeply discussed and I think in a very nice way related to the public. I want to add to this conversation by building an arc between the theory of knowledge and science to investing by simply asking, what is a good explanation for an investment? This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's October 20th, 2020. This is Krimdelko. For the day, we are down 4% since the last update. The market is closed now. The yearly performance is 208.5%. The market is up roughly 7%. For the year, we are outperforming by 201.5%. What is a good explanation? In his book, Deutsch talks about that at length. And I think I want to start with the basics and then build myself up towards the theory of investing and towards the way we're thinking about it, and also towards the possible improvements that we can have in our process of running Orange Capital Partners. So David Deutsch asks a very simple question. How can knowledge be produced from something that we don't know yet? How can we understand how the planets work, how the sun works, when we first of all didn't know about this before we discovered it, and most importantly also we don't experience it? He is clearly stating that experience alone is not enough, and it's very clear that we can't, for example, build a nuclear bomb just by experience because we've never seen a nuclear explosion before we did it. So we had to figure out another way, and that David Deutsch calls that an explanation. In more common lingo, that's called a theory, but the theory itself only survives if the explanation of the process underlying the theory is good enough. So in Deutsch's context, the explanation is really what drives progress in science. An explanation is a way to explain, to describe a certain method, and the explanation is what actually competes in the marketplace. So let's go back to the basics here. What is an explanation? Defined in the dictionary as a statement or account that makes something clear, or a reason or justification given for an action or belief. So the explanation is either a statement that makes something clear or a reason or justification for an action. That is what an explanation is. Now let's talk about some examples. Deutsch talks about 2 examples to make clear that not every explanation is acceptable. In Greek mythology, winter was explained as being a contract between a goddess and a god, and I don't want to go into details, but they explained winter by making the contract that the goddess shows up every year, and in that time everything gets cold. That is an explanation that is testable. You can test it because the explanation says every year it gets cold, and we can test that and say, yeah, it's actually happening. However, Deutsch makes the point that the explanation, the driving factors of the explanation have to be also driving factors of the underlying cause that we're trying to explain. And in this case, that is not the case. There is no relationship between the wedding of the goddess and the actual winter. Another explanation that Deutsch talks about, which is much better, is the way we explain today how winter works. The earth is tilted, it goes around the sun shows up every year and shows up in different places, and therefore there is a cold and hot weather, etc. That is a direct relation. There's a direct relationship between the actual explanation and the factors which drive the underlying dynamics, in this case the winter. So a good explanation is not just testable. In fact, Deutsch refutes the testability argument. He says that is really not very strong, and the scientific method actually has nothing to do with testability. Science has been testable for centuries. What changed during the Enlightenment is that science became competitive, and in the case of science in particular, it was the explanation which started to compete with each other, and we found ways to remove bad explanations and introduce better explanations without bloodshed. And when I say bloodshed, I really mean that. For example, the church before the Enlightenment killed people if they had a different explanation for the planets going around the world. They literally killed people, and the Enlightenment, through the freedom and civil rights and all that stuff, made it possible for people to not be killed while having different explanations. In fact, Karl Popper goes further and says that the whole idea of democracy, in fact, has nothing to do with who has the right to rule. He's trying to even avoid that question, who has the right to rule, and simply state that a good theory of society and a good theory of choice is based on the fact that bad choices can be removed without bloodshed. So we have to find a system. We would call this the marketplace of ideas, of explanations, of political actions, a marketplace that allows people to remove bad ideas, bad leaders, bad scientists without bloodshed. That's all there is in Karl Popper's words, and David Deutsch strongly believes in this. So to summarize this theory of epistemology, of the theory of knowledge that Karl Popper and David Deutsch in his books is propagating, it's a theory of explanation, an explanation being a statement about a certain underlying aspect, and the statement has to have the factors in the statement, or the points that the statement makes, have to have a relationship with their underlying dynamics. Now, let's make a jump to the investment world and ask the question, so what is a good explanation in the investment world? And actually brings me back to the beginning of this podcast series. The name, Not Even Wrong, actually goes back to this particular point. It's the question of, and it's obviously based on Pauli's statement that you're not even wrong, what you're talking about is not even wrong. So in order to earn the right to be wrong, you'll have to actually come up with an explanation that makes sense, that is related to the underlying dynamics. So for example, if I say that Tesla is a bad company because they're not competitive, that is not a good explanation, because it's not testable, and the underlying dynamics, Tesla as a company being good or bad, I can't say Tesla is a bad company because they're not competitive, because that is a tautology. Of course, if you're not competitive, you're not a good company. So it's a bad explanation. The marketplace, Wall Street, allows us to compete for these types of theories, and that's why we're so happy being investors, because we are not in the realm of debate here. We're in the realm of real financial markets, where the voting happens through money and not through words. So a good explanation for Tesla doing well is, for example, that they have a disruptive technology and they're building an innovation stack which is penetrating into a new large market. That is a better explanation, but it's not a perfect explanation. In fact, as I'm thinking out loud here, if I think about our statement, our mission statement at Orange Capital Partners, that our mission is to generate wealth by investing in disruptive technologies with large impact. There is an explanation in that mission statement, and the explanation is that we can generate wealth through disruptive technology. So we're making an implicit assumption that disruptive technologies will generate wealth. Now, the definition of disruptive technologies, according to Clayton Christensen, those are technologies that have a large impact on a new market or an existing market, and those technologies are not being taken care of by the incumbents, so they can grow and themselves into a leading position. So let's talk about the explanation that we use at Orange Capital Partners to generate wealth, or the theory that underlies our actions, the explanation we have for why we think we can succeed. We have three principles: 0 to 1, innovation stack, innovator's dilemma. In 0 to 1, Peter Thiel talks at length about the need to create a monopoly through intelligent design, to not be a lottery, to sit down, figure out what you want to do, and then relentlessly pursue it. Make sure it's a large market. Make sure you build a company around something which is defendable. In innovation stack, that's the extension of 0 to 1. McAlvey talks about how you can build a company that is very hard to compete with by solving problems, creating new problems, solving those problems, and grow yourself into an unpenetrable bastion. And in The Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen explains why incumbents typically don't care about these newcomers until it's too late. So we have a threefold explanation for why we believe that with our types of investments we can generate wealth. Now, is this good enough? First of all, we believe that testability of the testability is pretty good. We can test it against investments. So Tesla is a successful investment. Amazon fits the bill, is a successful investment. Square fits that bill, it's a successful investment. Uber does not fit the bill, although it's considered disruptive. It's not a successful investment. Lyft, same thing, considered disruptive, is not. Slack, disruptive, but it's not. Dropbox should be disruptive, it's not. Snapchat should be disruptive, it's not. Twitter, it's not. Facebook is, I would say, an edge case, and so on. Zoom is an edge case. So there are definitely situations. Zoom is a good example. It's a company we did not want to invest in because it doesn't fit our principles. And it's worth thinking about why. So let's take Zoom. Zoom, is it built by some entrepreneur with a definite design to create something in a very large market? I would say no. It's a feature. It's not more than that. Is there an innovation stack? Yes, the innovation stack is being built, and this is part of the success of Zoom, is because there are all these little intricacies and little problems, little details that they're pretty good at dealing with. The innovator's dilemma concept does that work? Absolutely not. Microsoft is all in, competing with Teams. There's other companies. This is a very competitive and crowded market. You cannot say that the incumbents here don't care. Let's take another example where we believe the disruptive force, as explained by us, is not working. Netflix. Again, it's considered a disruptive company in the market, and actually so far the stock has done very well. So are we wrong? Is the market wrong? We believe the market is wrong. Let's talk about it. Again, 0 to 1 concept. Is Reed Hastings a monopoly building entrepreneur that has a definite design? Absolutely, absolutely. Is he building an innovation stack? Absolutely. He's again creating, solving problems, creating new problems. They're doing shows. They're making sure those shows are marketed properly. It's absolutely a company that is on the 0 to 1 track and is also on the innovation stack track. The Clayton Christensen argument, not really working. Again, very strong competition, and everybody understands what needs to be done. So Netflix is losing its edge, and the innovation stack is, I would say, watering out. So the advantages are watering out, as opposed to Amazon and Tesla, where the advantages are even growing exponentially. So I think we can go on and on here. I just wanted to record this episode to give a sense for what is a good explanation. In our case, it's the 3 principles. We are testing every investment against those principles. I think every investor should have a good explanation for why they're investing. And I think this is a nice example of how the theory of epistemology and physics coming from Deutsch and Popper can help us in the investment world, organizing our thoughts and making sure that we put our energies where they are most rewarded. Thank you.